Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 513. Today we're going to take a look at Cry Havoc. This is a new game from Portal Games, and it will be releasing right around Gen Con timeframe in 2016. Now what this is kind of your dudes on a map style game. But don't run away screaming if you don't usually like that kind of game. This has a little bit something new, I think, for folks. The theme of the game is these different races, humans and these kind of magical pilgrim types of folks, and these machines, just a race of machines, are trying to take and exploit this new planet, which is inhabited by these trogs, which are these big, bulky, kind of stone characters. And there's a special resource there, and they're trying to grab that from the planet, sort of like Avatar. And you can play 2 to 4 players. Now if you play it 2 and 3 players, the game itself actually to a degree is controlling the trogs, although other players can kind of dip in and control it and kind of use it against the other players. But when you play with 4 players, then an actual player will be playing the trogs and they'll be able to win the game. So it reminds me a lot of Nexus Ops. So if you enjoyed that game, I would certainly take a look at this one and take a look at it and watch the walkthrough. If you did not like that style of game, I would still take a look at this because it's kind of a souped up, revved up, a little bit more design first kind of thing going on. Let's go ahead and just jump into it though, and then I'll tell you what I think about it at the end. Okay, so I've got the game here set up for 3 players. This board is actually double-sided. On the other side you have a 2-player side, and on this side you play the 3 or 4-player game. And here you can see the map of the world. Now if we were playing a 4-player game, the trogs would start here. You can see Trog HQ, but we're playing 3-player. And the reason I'm discussing 3-player is because I want to talk a little bit about how the trog actually works, you know, when it's sort of operated with a little bit of an AI or actually operated by the other players. When they are in play as the 4-player game, they play pretty much just like everybody else, but each of these 4 different factions has very asymmetrical powers and buildings and units and things, but all of the basic actions like moving, recruiting units, drawing and playing cards, etc., that's all basically the same. Now over here to the side you can see I've got the different setups for the different factions. You can see there's different buildings here, and there's also different cards that they're going to get and the different units and so on. And there's also on the board here a few things to take note of. Now we can see here is the headquarters of the different factions. We have these tokens out here, and these are actually out even when the trog player is playing, and as players move in here we're going to place trogs and crystals on these different regions. So some of the regions themselves actually will start with some crystals. You just scan the board there and take a look at these different symbols you can see there under the region name. The other thing to note about this is this tells you which kinds of cards you can play in battle. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but think of that as the terrain. So some of the cards that you can play, the tactics that you can execute, are based on the terrain of the place where you are at. The other thing that you might here have on the board are these exploration tokens, and these are usually beneficial, or always beneficial, for players as they move in. Sometimes you can also have these trog nests here on the other side of the board. These will actually come out at setup as well, so these will be just a little bit worse in terms of the number of trogs, but also probably have some more crystals. You can also see that the map actually wraps, so you have these arrows here. This will come back on top. In this one, if you go out here, you can come back through here. And also the other thing to mention just about the trogs is they will get tunnels, and they'll be able to move, only they will be able to move as if these different regions were adjacent, and they can actually build more tunnels through the course of the game. So how a game's going to work is we're going to play at least 5 rounds, and this is the scoring track that you can see here, and players have tokens of their color there that they're going to be tracking their score. And the first thing you're going to do every round is flip over the next event tile. So you can see I've had 1 there at the start, 2, 3, 4, and then down here I've placed this marker, and this is final scoring. So the 5th round, that will be, the scoring will be enabled for the end of that round. So the first thing you're going to do in the game is flip over the event token, and then you're going to do it. So remove 2 crystals from the region with the most crystals. Or you may actually get, every player can draw a terrain tactic card and so on. So these are kind of good and bad. And then as players play though and they score points, let's say that the yellow player scored a lot of points here and he shot up here to 14. Then as he passes this event is going to move down and stack on the next one, and we're actually going to flip over and do both of these events. So in that case, he's also shortened the game by a round because he shot up and score so quickly. So you're always going to resolve all the events, but if somebody shoots up really high, you're going to resolve both events and play one less round. And then obviously, once we get down to here, then this means scoring is going to always be enabled for the last round because you're not always going to score every single round. Players are going to have to dictate that a little bit. So if we take one player's kind of faction area here, there's a couple things to notice. First thing is we do have a sort of a main board here, and this gives you the turn structure. So like I said, the first thing is the event. You're going to update the initiative, refresh skills, and so on, and play through the round. And that gives you down here a list of your sort of basic actions that you can do. And then all of the factions have 3 separate buildings. These will be out, and then you'll have tokens that match these. So you can see here's the airfield here, which allows you to fly ships around and get at least temporary control of some of the regions, and you can build these structures. So you can build up to 3 of these airfields here. Now you can never build the same structure in the regions, but all of these factions have 3, except for the machines, which you might expect up here. They actually have 5 buildings that they're able to build on their turn. And as you can see, the different units here are different. So this is kind of your typical space marine, your earthlings, your humans. Here we have the pilgrims, and these are sort of a little bit more mystical types of creatures. And then lastly, we have the machines there, and these are just all these mechs that they're going to be. So these are all the units that you're going to get, and I'll show you the trogs here in a second. The other thing that you're going to have is these skill cards. And so you're always going to have, let's see if I can find the default one. Yep. So the rules tell you to kind of play, if a basic game, everybody just pulls their default skill and you just kind of tuck it here on the side of your board. And then you can take, for like an average game, you take 1 random skill plus the default skill. And then for a veteran game, you take a default skill plus 2 random. So I don't know that you would ever want to play with all these enabled because it might get kind of wonky and out of balance. I expect that would actually happen because I have seen some combos like, ooh, that's dastardly, you got to watch out for that. Even just, you know, playing with the veteran rules. So you're going to have a variety of these skill cards, and sometimes you'll have these tokens here. The skills will tell you to put these tokens out on the board. The last thing, you have these control markers, and these are going to show control of the different regions that you have. And then each player starts with a little deck of their tactics cards. And you can see a number of things on these cards. During your turn, which I'll talk more about in a minute, you can kind of spend them for either or. So they're multi-use cards. So this one, you could move 3 units or 1 unit 3 spaces. This one, you know, you get a little bit of move out of it. This is for recruiting and so on. So you're kind of having to choose what to do with the cards. But you might also save them for battle, and this will give you a little battle tactic. So when you have a battle that happens, you want to save these, and so you can kind of mess around with your opponent that way. So that's a general overview of what each faction gets. So let's go back to the turn. So again, after the events, you may update the initiative. Now there is a card that each faction has in here that when they play it, this one here, and when you choose to do one of these actions, you can see the exclamation point. So in addition to doing the recruit or whatever, you can position yourself on the initiative track. So at the start of the game, this is random, and then let's say blue had played it, so he may drop out and say, you know what, I want to go last next turn. And so at the start of the next round, and then we're going to reorder this to match whatever the upcoming initiative is, and so on. And this may change from round to round. And this, after you do the event, at this point you actually update the initiative, and the turn order is now set for the following round. Now after you update the initiative, you're going to refresh skills. The one thing about these skills is they can only be used once per round. Now you can do these in addition to your actions. So if you had all 3 skills up and you wanted to play a couple of cards from your tactics deck and then activate all 3 of those, you could, but you're done for the round. So now you're going to refresh those. And then the next thing you're going to do is always going to draw 4 cards out of your deck. So as you play cards, you don't kind of like automatically draw cards. You can actually take actions to draw some extra cards, but each round you're going to draw 4. You do have a hand limit of 7, so you have to discard down to 7 after that. And then you're going to have 3 rounds of actions. So players are going to take a round of playing actions. So once all the players take an action, you move this down, everybody takes another action, move it down, everybody takes a third action. And then we're going to resolve any combats at this point. So you may trigger a combat in your first round of actions, but you're not actually going to resolve it until later. So there's going to be a lot that might change if you just march right in right away. There's some stuff can happen. You don't have battles right away. So what are the actions? The first action you can do is move, and I kind of showed that already. You have these arrows here. So you can discard any number of cards. Let's say I just wanted to, for fun, wanted to do this. Like I said, I'm going to do a move, and so I'm going to discard this one, this one, this one. So I have 5 movement points, and this will also trigger my ability to change the initiative because I did that. Sometimes you might have a little card symbol here. So in addition to whatever you chose, you draw a card, or you might have a star and you'd actually score some points for playing the card. Those kind of effects will usually come out of these decks here, which I'll talk about in a minute. So I can do that. Now I've got 5 movement points to spend. So you can take and move, let's say 4 people, one spot, and then another person, another spot, which wouldn't necessarily be legal in this case, but you can kind of split up those movement points how you need to. You can move one person 5 spaces if you really wanted to. Now, if you move into an area that has, let's say, other troops, let's say move in there, then he would have to stop. If you move into any areas here with these Trog encounter tokens, you also have to stop. Now, once you move into an area here, you're going to resolve these tokens here in a certain order. You're always going to do these exploration tokens first, and like I said here, these are helpful. So draw 1 terrain tactic card. You might get this one here, which is place 2 troops from your reserve, which just means off the board, into that region, which is always a bonus to find. And so you can resolve those, and then you resolve any of these Trog tokens here. So this will say place 2 Trog and 2 crystals in the region. So we'll go ahead and place 2 crystals here, and now we can take a look at the Trog there, and these are kind of these big rock looking guys. So these guys are going to come in here. So now, because you're in a zone here with an opposing faction, you're going to take the lowest numbered battle marker, and in the case this is 1, so we're going to say, okay, so once we do all our actions, this is the first battle that we're actually going to resolve. And so the next time that somebody moves in and there's a contested area, you'll take the second one, and that'll be the second battle that's going to happen in that particular area. Now, it's worth noting, once there is a battle token here, unless you have a special ability, you can't move in here. Nobody else can move in here, and the defender can only leave with a certain amount of troops. So it's a little bit interesting to explain. It's very simple though. So when the attacker moves in, you're actually going to put them on the battle token that shows who the attacker was. Now later on, if this wasn't a computer controlled player or the game controlled player, they could move out troops, but only more than double the attacker. So in this case, that would be 8 because there's 4 here. So if the Trog had more than 8, which would be pretty rare, then they could move the excess out. But let's say we moved in here, with 1, then you still wouldn't be able to move anybody out. So only the defender now can leave here and try to escape, but these troops are kind of pinning down most of their troops anyway. Now that's a move. The next thing you can do is recruit, and so you can play any number of cards here and use their recruit icon. So let's say I played this as the blue player. I've moved all of my troops out of the base. I've discarded that, and I have 2 recruit icons, and so then they come out. So that's the recruit action. The next thing you might do is build. And so you can see these wrenches here. So you can use these to build buildings and to actually activate buildings. Now the thing to note about buildings is you have to control the area. There can't be a battle token happening in the area. You can't build buildings in your recruit area. And remember, I said you can't have 2 of the same type. So let's say these Trogs were out of town and Blue, who actually was controlling this, and the turns have moved along a little bit. He could now build in a harvester here, and he would build one of these. And you can see the cost on the card itself, on this card stock here. So the build cost is 2 of those wrenches, and then you can actually activate it for 1 wrench. So if I played a card with 3 wrenches, I could build it and activate it. You can only activate it once per action round, but on a future round I could activate it again, but I couldn't do this a whole bunch on 1 turn. And this is add 1 crystal from the supply to your pool. Now we'll start to talk a little bit about the asymmetric qualities, but these pilgrims here, they kind of mess with and get these kind of mystical powers out of the crystals. So they have a little crystal pool, so they'll pull this out of supply and add this, and they'll be able to use these and spend these to do different things. Buildings are all different. So the humans, they have these different ways of getting to faraway spaces. Here's an artillery battery, which actually allows us to deploy these tokens to other battles that we're not necessarily directly involved with our troops. The machines, the red faction has this orbital sniper, and so they can zap a troop out of a region as long as there's not already a battle token there. There's just a ton of variety in the different buildings. And of course the Trog player, if you're playing a 4-player game, has very cool abilities on their buildings too. So you can spend wrenches to build buildings and or activate buildings, and you can do as much as you want. You just spend as many wrenches, but just remember you can only activate each building one time on a turn. Now the other thing that you can do is you can actually draw these tactic cards. Now you can either draw off the top of your own deck, or you can draw from one of these 4 different terrain decks here. And there's a couple things to notice about this. But when you do that, you're going to draw and you're going to take 2 cards off of either deck, either your own deck or one of these. You take 2, you're going to keep one in your hand. Let's say we'll take a distraction, keep that in our hand, and then you'll shuffle this deck back up, and then that will be your action for that turn. Now let's take a closer look at these. You can see these have a matching symbol to some of the terrain that's on the board. So you've got water, mountains, and you've got kind of this desert symbol and the swamp symbol. Well, all of these cards have battle tactics. Now, not all the cards in your starter deck have battle tactics. Some of them are just the icons. But these also tell you which icons these have. So all of these swamp ones have these 2 recruits. All of these deserty ones have one of each of these, but they allow you to draw another card off your deck when you play them. And then if we zoom down there, you can see these all have 3 build points, and these have the movement and so on. So you want to sort of, choose the card based on what you might need in your deck. Like if you're the red faction, you might go to the mountain area to get some more ore, for example, and these will give you more abilities to build buildings. But you also want to take a look at these symbols here and see what areas you're in and what you might be moving into on the board, because when you go to play the tactics cards during battle, you can play any from your starting deck, but only those from those terrain decks matching that symbol. Now the last action that you can possibly do on your turn is actually enable scoring for the end of the round. Now each player has in their deck this card here that says action enable scoring. So you just play this card. When you do that, you ignore all these icons there. And then you're going to take your enable scoring token. So in this case, the yellow player would take theirs. You're going to stick it up here like that, and only one player can enable scoring per round. And you may go a couple of rounds, it's feasible, that nobody enables scoring, and so nobody's really scoring any points, at least at the end of the round. You'll score points during battles and so on, but so you're going to go ahead and do that. Now, like I said, in the last round, the game itself is going to enable scoring. So the scoring is going to work a little bit different when the game does it. So when a player does it, what's going to happen at the end of the round, the player that enabled scoring is going to get a point for each region that they control. So in this case, yellow would get 4. And they're going to get a point for each crystal in the regions that they control. So in this case, they would get 2 points there. Now everybody else is just going to get points for the crystals. So blue here, instead of getting 3 points, 1 for the region and 2 for the crystals, they're just going to get the points from the crystals. Now if you're playing with the Trogs, they actually only score for half the crystals they have rounded up. At the end of the game, nobody scores for the regions. It's just purely about the crystals. But one thing to know is, again, this is a card you've got to play, which is going to go in your discard pile and may not actually come up. Now, one thing you can do with the deck, which we didn't notice on our first game, but reading some of the rules in the back, this is actually pretty important, is you can actually play cards sort of along with cards to just kind of dump them out of your hand. So if like, I'm going to play this and move once, but I'm also going to discard these and not actually spend those, just so you can cycle through your deck, because maybe you want to get back to, either this card or another card. So that's something that you can do to push yourself through the deck. Otherwise, you might get kind of stuck. After you've done your 3 rounds of actions, like I said, you're going to go through and resolve the battles in this order, and then you're going to see who the attacker was, and they're going to distribute their forces on a separate battle board first, followed by the defender. However, in this case, we're playing against the Trogs, which don't have a player in a 3-player game. So the player to the blue player's left is going to control the actions of the Trog and actually even be able to play their own cards from their deck to help play some of the tactics. So like I said, you've got these different cards that you're going to keep for battle tactics. So when you're actually controlling the Trog as sort of a manipulating player, you're having to make a decision to actually use your own cards and put them in your own discard pile and affect this battle to negatively affect the blue player, but you've spent that card for the turn. So if you've got a battle coming up later, then you've got to really think about that, because then you'll be able to use that card. Here is the battle track, and it gives you a nice little step-by-step breakdown of the battle. Now the first thing you're actually going to do is you're going to add a crystal to the region where the battle is going to take place. So it's going to make that region a little bit juicier even to fight over. And so now the attacker is going to place, in their case, these 4, and you're going to choose the theater or the objective that you're trying to control. So as this pilgrim player, I might try to place 2 here into the region control, and then just for fun, not necessarily a good idea, I'll place 1 here and capture prisoners, and then 1 here in attrition. And then the controlling player, or if you're fighting a player directly, is going to take their tokens, and then they're going to put these. So maybe we'll put here these 2, and then we'll go ahead and just put this one here like that. So if nothing changed here, then what we're going to do is we're going to walk down and resolve these majorities and this attrition here at the bottom. Now before you do that, you actually have a chance to play cards. Starting with the attacker, they could play here objective card, or excuse me, a tactics card. They can play this one here. So this one will actually say, move 1 of your troops from one battle objective to a different one. So I could say, you know what, I really want to control the region, I'm going to move him up here like that. And then the other player, the defender, could play a card, or play a card in favor of the trogs there. Maybe they'll fly in some air support here, and it says add 1 unit from your reserve onto any battle objective. And again, if you're playing for the trogs, you grab a trog out of the reserve. And so we'll go back and forth. Now once you pass playing the battle cards, you can't play anymore, then your opponent can keep playing them. Now once that happens, you're going to resolve here these, like I said. So the first thing you're going to resolve is whoever has the majority in this particular box is going to be the controller. They're going to take control or keep control of the region. If it's a tie, it goes to the defender. And if you have control, then you actually get 2 victory points on the spot, and the defender themselves has to retreat. When the trogs are not controlled by a player, they actually go off the board, and then we'll flip up a new trog token, and then we'll put that in an adjacent spot. You have to retreat to a friendly region. You can't retreat to a neutral region, or else they've got to go off the board. Then we're going to work our way down here. Now whoever has the majority here is actually going to be able to take one of the opposing units, and these actually should stay on here. You can take one of the opposing units from anywhere on this board and take it prisoner, which you probably would normally want to take it from down here if there was a troop there. So you would take that and keep it defender. Now you're going to score 1 point every round after we resolve all the battles for each prisoner that you have. Now you can spend 2 points and actually take a prisoner back from somebody if you need to. So that's kind of interesting, and that's also one of the main tiebreakers at the end of the game, is the number of prisoners. So you go down here and work through the prisoners, and then down here, this one you don't actually count for majority. I should have said, I think, if this is tied, nothing happens. It's whoever has the majority here. Now down here, each of us will get to kill 1 other of our opponent's tokens there. And there's actually some abilities, the humans have got one where they can sneak in and put tokens and different skill tokens out here, and they can actually participate in attrition in a battle they're not even involved in. But for each person you kill, to go back to the reserve, and then you get a victory point. You do the first battle, you'll go to the next place that has battle number 2, and so on, and resolve all the battles. Like I said, everybody gets points for prisoners at the battle. Then you check, again, if scoring was enabled for the round, you do all the scoring based on next round. You grab the next event, you do that, and then you go back into playing all your different actions. You play in 5 or even less rounds, and then whoever has the most victory points is the winner. Okay, so that is Cry Havoc. What do I think of it? Well, this is kind of a one where it's like, where do I start, really? First, let's start with player count, because that's always a good spot to jump off of. I think this plays excellent at every player count. Now I haven't played with 3, so I shouldn't really say that, but it played awesome with 2 and great with 4, and I really expect 3 to work. Now I said earlier, this kind of reminds me of Nexus Ops, which you kind of need the full player count for. The whole controlling of the AI, or the third player, the dummy, it's not even a dummy player really, but you're controlling the trogs, you're controlling the natives of this land, and it's really a balancing and a weight of a decision about, how much do I really invest in this battle where I'm controlling the trogs versus, I've got to keep these cards for my own battle. It's very, very it's a tough decision. And it's nice to have that kind of third entity out there, because right away you're having battles, you're having to deal with this native resource here, this native folks that this is their home planet. You're trying to jack all their crystals and their energy from, and it just really puts you right into it right from the beginning. And it can be a big decision to throw your weight kind of behind them in terms of helping them fight back this other opponent. It could be more advantageous to you to spend some of those resources and those cards against them, because then maybe you're going to grab a huge cache of these crystals. The different factions play completely, totally different, really. I mean, the basic actions are all the same, but the machines, you want to really go after a lot of those mountain areas and mines, and get some of those machines and those buildings, and really start activating them and really being annoying, because some of those where it's like allows you to kill units outside of combat are just like, I mean, they can be a big shift, and be really annoying too when it happens. You're like, oh, well, I was going to march into that territory, but now I'm down 2 people. So I'm just going to sit here with these guys. I had these big plans. So those are annoying too, but the humans can also be annoying, because you can spread out your control. You can get up, buildings, and you've got these sometimes, depending on the skill card that you get out, you have these little combos that you can do. You can just kind of immediately score a few points for control of these different regions. Now you can actually put your control markers into spots with Trog tokens, because they haven't quite like woken up or anything. But once some actual figures get in there, then of course the control will shift. So they're annoying in that case. The blue ones, like I talked about, they manipulate the crystals themselves, and they can do some cool special abilities. And the Trogs are just like they're kind of Zergy in a lot of ways, and they got the tunnels, and they can lay traps and all that stuff. So you really are going to focus on exploiting your special abilities, exploiting your special buildings, and trying to win the game through those means. So that's excellent, and that kind of leads me into the whole production side of it. I think it's a really fine production. Everything looks graphically really good. I like the different miniatures, and having the little bases clipped on there is very nice. And I think I'm actually paint these because they're nice little miniatures for this style of game. The next thing to talk about, I think, is the card play itself, and I think this is what all the other stuff is nice. It's good. But this is what anchors the game. Is you have a card here, and let me just try to put this up as an example. So you've got these symbols, right? Those are nice. Maybe you can get some build actions going on, but you also have this battle ability here. And so that's a tough decision to, how do I use these cards? Because the game is very, very tight in a lot of ways, where it's like, oh, okay, I'll kind of get stuff out there. But once that board gets crowded, and it's going to get crowded quick, you've got to really think about holding those certain battle tactic cards back, because as you saw in the example there, well, I'm like shifting guys from one region to another, one kind of theater to another. Maybe it was so important for me to get region control because it has a huge cache of those crystals. So that's going to get me a lot of points. So if somebody starts like manipulating in the order of the resolution of that track sometimes, or moving guys up and down, that's really going to swing a lot, even though you think you have like a troop advantage, but you've got to not be cocky about it, because even if you have like 5 troops and they've got 3, like, oh, I've got a pretty good advantage, I'll do some here and I'll sprinkle one here. Well, they play a couple of cards, and now things are completely different inside of that that objective track. And the other thing is, though, is as the game kind of progresses, you may get to situations where you don't have very many cards because you spent them, doing different stuff on the turn. So you may actually only have 1 battle tactic card to spend. And you're like, oh, I'm in 3 battles and I have 1 battle tactics card. So I'm not really going to win on any of these because I did not properly plan. And there's that complete agony over the card play. and over what you do. And you could have the other situation, which happened yesterday, is I had a bunch of cards and I was ready, but then I had like nothing to move stuff with. I couldn't get to some of these different regions that I needed to get into. Is because I wasn't even really thinking. I was so thinking down the roads of winning, going here, winning this battle, you know, building up this building to get some my control tokens spread out. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, well, I really wanted to move more than one troop into the next region, but I've only got one arrow left. So that whole kind of like, you know, synergy between your hand of cards and what you're trying to get out of it is, it's like very kind of basic and easy. It's like, you know, you play this for move, you play this for the recruit, but you've got to really take a kind of a holistic view of your hand and see like, okay, what am I supposed to be doing here? And I don't want this next sentence to scare people away, but it really reminded me of Mage Knight, because in Mage Knight you get the hand of cards, you're like, oh, okay, I have a headache now because I'm trying to figure out the best way to do it. Now in this game, it's not as crazy heavy like Mage Knight, but it can be a noodle to chew on, because it can be very difficult to figure out what the right thing to do is. And that has more actually to do with the other players than necessarily the cards in your hand. But you've got to really kind of suck out of there, okay, what are you trying to tell me here, hand of cards? Are you trying to tell me that I should lock down, I should build some you know, some structures and then worry about stuff for next turn, you know, so on. So it's just a lot to kind of spin through and go over. But yeah, that's kind of the three kind of thrusts of it for me. Is it works awesome at the different player counts, which is not usual for this kind of game. It just is not. The card play is just horrendously like stressful. And then the four different factions play really very, very, very differently. And it's very fun to try to, you know, I don't want to play the Pilgrims now. I'm going to play the humans, and I really want to try to exploit that. And it reminds me a lot of, you know, something like Cthulhu Wars or Chaos in the Old World, that kind of type of vibe, where each faction just really has just a ton of different special effects. And the game, so the last thing I'll close with here is the kind of the length of the game. The box says 1 to 2 hours, and I think that is certainly correct. I could see now a 2-player game getting played maybe less than an hour, but that would be after you've played it a couple times. But you can certainly play a 2-player game in an hour and knock it out, and it would be fun. And a 4-player game, you know, probably take you about 2 hours. But again, that could probably come down if the whole table was experienced. So you've got this kind of, I've seen a lot of comparisons to, I guess, Kemet and Blood Rage and that kind of thing, and I understand those comparisons. I do, but this is a quicker sort of version. It's a little bit, in some ways, it's a little bit more accessible because you have your basic stuff. You move, you recruit, boom, 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 boom. And then it anchors it with this like, haha, guess what? You have a tough decision with this deck of cards. That thing, which really kind of puts it down. So it really shrinks that space and kind of streamlines that style of game, which is what Nexus Ops really did in a lot of ways. It was kind of this very streamlined Risk on an alien planet, you know, when you were trying to control these different resources. So it has that kind of vibe there. But it's like, this is like a smooth sheen polish with in a very shiny metal. So I highly recommend this game, loving the game. I don't ever need to play Nexus Ops again, and probably, yeah, so I'll leave the other, I need to play it some more times before I start comparing it to like, more seriously to games like Kemet and, what's the other one it would remind me of? I don't remember. But, so yeah, so it's right up there in that kind of very well fine-honed design, dudes on a map attacking game. So anyway, definitely take a look at this one. Thanks.